Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's Information Studies 752 lecture, Websites. So here are weekly topics. What considerations should archivists make when choosing features of their website? Why are websites important for archives? Why are websites important for researchers? And what information should archivists make available and easy to find on an archive's website? The first thing that I want to do is connect websites to the different types of infrastructure in the Hackman book. And there are a few different connections that you can make. One interesting one that I like to focus on is the placement of the archives within an organization. The more highly regarded an archive is within this organization, the more likely it is that the archive's website is going to be featured prominently in the sort of host website for the organization. So if you don't know exactly where the website for your university's archive is, but you know to start with the website for the university itself, then that might be your entry point for looking for the archive's website. And if the archive's website is featured prominently on the homepage for the university itself, then it's just going to make it easier for potential researchers to find the link to your archive's website. But obviously, a university or an organization isn't going to feature the archive's website prominently unless it values the archive itself. You're not going to highlight something that you don't really value or think very highly of, right? And this can kind of trickle down to a lower level too. So say the archive is a department of the library or sort of a unit within a university's library. And maybe that if the archive is highly regarded, then it will have a strong presence on the library's website. Or it may be pretty hidden because people at the university or the people who are in charge of the library department, might think of archives as an afterthought and kind of bury access to the archives website behind, menus and kind of other obscure places. And this is something that has happened to me, more than a few times. And sometimes it's just a struggle to find exactly where you can get in contact with an archivist or where you can look at collection material. And again, I think that the more highly regarded a resource is, the more sort of promoted it's going to be and the more accessible its website is going to be, which can only facilitate the use of the archive by people because they don't have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out exactly where the archive's website is and how to access resources that the archive has to offer. Another interesting one is relationships with other individuals or organizations. If your archive is maybe is a part of a consortia, then maybe that consortia's website would have a link to your archive's website, and researchers can access your website that way. And maybe if you have a relationship with a sort of a single other archive, then you might agree to have each other's websites listed on maybe like a local resources page or something like that. And that can be a way to increase awareness and access of your archive's website. If you have good relationships with maybe specific individuals, then they can definitely promote your website and let people know, that it's valuable and helpful, assuming that it is, of course. So there are a few different ways that having good relationships with other individuals and organizations can facilitate the use of your archives website as well, and of course can perhaps also lead to increased resources to aid in the development of your website too. Another interesting thing about the archive's freedom of action is if an archives has more freedom of action, then maybe they have more say in the content of the archive website. If your archive isn't really thought of as being very competent or as just kind of like a promotional tool, then it may be that other people dictate what the content of the archives website is, whereas if archives are valued and thought of as being competent and responsible parts of an organization, then the archive may have more freedom to determine what the content should be, and that might allow the archives to have content on the website that more effectively promotes the archives and the resources that it has to offer. So just to revisit freedom of action as a type of infrastructure. Staff is always an important type of infrastructure. So you may not have staff that are required to set up the website itself. That's probably something that your organization's IT people are going to be involved with. But you do have to have staff who have to think about what information to include in the website, how the website might be structured, how to communicate the different resources that the archive has to offer to people that are viewing the website, ideally in a way that is as efficient as possible. And that can take an awareness of what the archive has to offer, an awareness of how to communicate to researchers what the archive has to offer, some understanding of how websites should be set up, kind of generally speaking, how information should be organized. And that can be a pretty specific body of knowledge to have. So there's definitely some expertise involved with sort of setting up an archive website. Another interesting one is organizational culture. So making sure that the website is sort of reviewed and updated as necessary. Things change within the archive, things change within society at large. And so do you have the organizational culture in place to make sure that your website reflects those changes? Or is your website going to be kind of ignored because no one thinks to update it? And that might result in researchers viewing a website which may seem dated and may seem like a website that doesn't really reflect well on the archive itself. So organizational culture can be a big type of infrastructure to have as well when it comes to websites, and just keeping them organized and up to date. Okay, so those are just a few examples of the connections between websites and infrastructure. But it's always interesting to think of sort of the resources that go into something so that you can kind of plan for that and decide sort of how capable your archive is of engaging in something like a really complex website, or maybe you need to be realistic about the infrastructure that you have and keep it fairly simple and straightforward. Again, it just kind of depends on the resources that your archive is capable of bringing to bear. So next I'll talk about websites as outreach tools. So as I've kind of touched on before, a key thing that websites do for archives is they can demonstrate the value of the archives. And they can do that either by highlighting resources that the archive has, so ways that the archives can serve the public, ways that the archives can facilitate research, whether it's online or in person, which the title article really focuses on. But just saying, here are the great collections that we have. Here are the great services that we can offer you. And that's why you should value us as an institution. Websites can also demonstrate value by showcasing the competence of the archive and the understanding that the archive has as far as what's important for researchers and what resources to highlight. So as I kind of touched on before, if you have a website that is up to date and is really easy to find and navigate through and use, then that's really going to reflect positively on the overall quality and competence of the archive itself. It's going to show people, wow, this information is organized really well. The language used on these websites is really clear. This website is engaging. That makes me feel good about using and supporting this archive. Or conversely, it can not demonstrate value if things are out of date, if menus and other features of the website are confusing or inconsistent. So this can be kind of a two-way street. And another way that archival websites can demonstrate value is by facilitating use. So again, by providing clear and intuitive access to ways that researchers can use the materials that the archive has. So providing direct links to collection material, providing links to finding aids, providing links to researcher services, all that stuff. And, again, this can kind of go two ways. If archives have websites that don't facilitate use because, menus are confusing, or it's unclear how researchers can reach resources that help them use the archive, then that can just frustrate people and make them kind of want to walk away. But if done right, archival websites can be strong illustrations of the value that archives can provide, both to its host organization and to the general public. So again, we have this diagram where websites can increase an awareness of the value of archives, which can lead to advocacy. The awareness of value can lead to use because people say, wow, this is a really helpful website. I feel comfortable using this repository, and that use can increase the awareness of the value of the archives, and that can translate into advocacy on the archive's behalf. So what's interesting about websites is they're kind of a secondary level of outreach, and people may be unlikely to be aware of it or to seek it out without some knowledge of the archive itself, right? If you don't know that an archive exists, you're probably not going to try and access its website and try and use its resources. So archival websites, to a greater extent than other types of social media, need to be highlighted and other forms of outreach. So things like social media, through exhibits, through reference services, through online collections. Ideally, these things are going to channel traffic back through the archive's website so that people are just aware of it and more inclined to look at it as opposed to just kind of stumbling across it through, a Google search or happenstance or however they happen to come across it. So archival websites are reliant on other forms of outreach that the archive is doing, and so that goes back to the importance of highlighting the archive's website when you are doing, Facebook posts or Instagram or having an online exhibit, the public views, and then that can lead them to hopefully go to the website and explore more. One other thing that I want to focus on before we move into the second part of this lecture, which involves me taking a look at the website for the University of Wyoming's American Heritage Center, is the idea of evaluation. So evaluating how well your website adheres to structure and design standards. So things that the Lynch and Horton article or chapter has talked about for this week. How accessible your website is. So something else that Lynch and Horton discuss in their chapters. How well your archive adheres to professional standards. So does it look professional? Does it look clean and crisp? Or does it seem like maybe, you know, an amateur or someone who didn't really know what they were doing, just kind of threw it together? And so some ways that you can evaluate how well your archives meet these different criteria is doing research or studies or usability studies, and you know, trying to connect the information that your researchers are using and seeing which information you should be highlighting on your website. So if you do research or studies and you see that a lot of people are accessing your digital collections, then you should probably make it really clear on your website how to access your digital collections. So just knowing what types of information your researchers are looking for and highlighting that information, highlighting those resources as much as possible on your website so that people can come and find exactly what they're looking for instead of having to kind of look around and find things on their own and potentially getting frustrated and walking away. Another way that you could find out what information you should highlight on your website when you're evaluating it is by looking at your search function. So seeing what people are searching for, because that may indicate that people are having trouble finding what it is they're looking for, and that you need to use this information to go in and evaluate how well you're highlighting certain resources or characteristics of your archive, and maybe changing your website so that whatever people are searching for is more obvious to them, and they're just able to find it without having to take the time and effort to do a search. It may be that people just come in and do a search no matter what, but ideally, if you have that information available for them sort of right off the bat, then it'll reduce the need for them to do that if they don't want to. So in addition to relying on research or studies to see how your researchers are finding and discovering the information that you need, you can also do usability tests for the website itself. So seeing how well people can navigate through your website, seeing if there are any complaints that people have or feedback that people using the website have. And just using that information to, again, consider how well your website is designed, how well your website is structured, how accessible it is, how professional it looks, and using whatever feedback you get to change your website so that it addresses whatever problems or issues come up during usability tests. Lynch and Horton suggests having a way for people to give feedback to the webmaster or the person or people that maintain the website, and that way you can kind of direct feedback about the strengths and weaknesses of your website without having to do an entire usability study. So that's certainly an option that can be helpful. And evaluating where people are coming from when they view your website can help you evaluate other forms of outreach that you have going on. So if you see that people are coming to your website from your Facebook posts or Instagram posts, then you can say, okay, well, our social media is doing what we want it to. It's bringing people to our website and exposing them to the different resources and services that we offer. Or if you see that there isn't a whole lot of traffic from your social media to your website, then you need to think, okay, well, are we just not highlighting our website enough? Do we need to change our social media so that we highlight our website more? Or what's that looking like? Is our social media accomplishing the goals that we have, or do we need to kind of change things around so that we're getting more traffic through our website? Again, evaluation takes time and effort. It does take infrastructure, but if it prevents you from having a website that people just get frustrated by and makes them swear to never use your archive again, then a little bit of time and effort is usually a good investment to prevent that kind of thing from happening and to prevent people not seeing your website as something that demonstrates the value of your archives, but demonstrates, how unorganized or out of touch or, basically incompetent that your archive really is. So evaluation is important just so you can know what's going on, why it's going on, and make any changes that are necessary and helpful. Okay, so that ends the PowerPoint slide part of this presentation. As I mentioned, I'm going to go into the American Heritage Center's website and see how well that reflects some of the ideas and suggestions and tools recommended / mentioned in the PIDL article and in the Lynch and Horton chapters, and evaluate the AHC website through that perspective. Okay, so as promised, here is the website for the University of Wyoming's American Heritage Center, sort of the homepage for the AHC. And the Lynch and Horton article suggests, or chapters suggest, that homepages have 4 primary elements. So identity, navigation, timeliness or content focus, and tools. So this homepage does a good job of conveying the identity of the American Heritage Center. So there's a nice picture of the Centennial Complex, which is where the AHC is housed. It kind of shows the general color scheme and other visual clues that we'll see throughout the rest of this website. We'll talk about navigation in a second. The content focus is pretty good too. So it really focuses on, here are the virtual resources you can use. Here's some information about visiting us. Here are ways that you can explore the collections. And it has some additional resources down here, more related to outreach, things that the AHC is involved with. There's a featured collection, so kind of focusing on specific collections that the AHC houses. There are some important links down here. I guess I don't really know why these are important links if they aren't located closer to the top or off to the side. I mean, if they're important, it seems like something that you would want to highlight sort of right off the bat without making people kind of scroll down through, especially this thing. Like, this is just way too big. And it really, it takes effort to kind of scroll through and then, okay, these are important links, so why aren't they easier to find? Then there's an About Us section, so you can find some connections to the AHC social media things. You can sign up for the newsletter if you want. And then there is a nice footer here. So there are some useful directories here. So like I said, you can connect to some of the virtual resources that the AHC offers. Some things about how to visit, how to explore collections. So really kind of the main things that the AHC is involved with. What isn't present on this this homepage unfortunately, is a search option. So if you came to the home page and you were like, okay, I know what I want, I just want to be able to type in and search what I'm looking for, search for what I'm looking for, there's not really an option to do that here. I guess you can kind of look through all these and see if it's something that if any of these links lead to something that you want, but it'd probably be just more efficient to have a search option at the very top that researchers can just use and kind of not have to scroll through all this stuff to find what they're looking for. There is a search thing up here, but this actually does a search for the entire University of Wyoming website and not just the American Heritage Center. So, I guess if you look long enough, you might find what you're looking for, but you're going to have to go through a lot of stuff before you actually find what you want. So I touched on navigation a little bit already. It's kind of annoying to have to scroll through all this stuff to try and find what you're looking for. There's not a search thing that can help you navigate directly to where you want. There's not something at least immediately obvious that allows you to see sort of all the different pages within the website that you can go to. I mean, sure, they're kind of chunked up here, but it's always helpful to have some kind of menu that shows sort of everywhere that you can go so that researchers can access that. If you do scroll all the way down to the very bottom of the footer, there is a web page sitemap, which will take you to this menu, which shows all these, really everything on the map, right? But unless you know to scroll all the way down here and click on web page sitemap, you're probably not going to realize that that's an option. So that's another problem too. This should be much more obvious for researchers to find and look at in order to be able to navigate as quickly to where they want to go, as easily as possible. So yeah, there are some definite pros and cons to this homepage. Okay, so let's explore the navigation through the website a little bit further. The information architecture that the Lynch and Horton chapters, some of the Lynch and Horton chapters focus on. So the idea of click depth, so how many clicks are required to reach a given page, having direct access, having things like feedback and dialogue to show you sort of exactly where you are within the website. So let's click on the RRAD sessions, which I'm not even really sure what that is. They should probably explain what RRAD is. And, that takes us to a website about, I guess, remote research and discovery. You might not know that unless you actually get to this page and read that. And then we have a nice little menu here that we can look at, which is good. But this doesn't really show you within this menu where you are. So are you within the About the AHC menu? And also what's frustrating is this menu doesn't drop down. So there are actually other options within these hierarchies that you can't see unless you actually click on the page itself. So for instance, if you go to collections, then all these things are available, but they're not available if you just click, if you just hover over them. And it's like you may not realize that Discover Our Collections is there, or Anaconda Geological Documents is housed under collections. So there really should be some way that this drops down and you can see all these options instead of having to click on collections to see what these options are. So that's definitely something that can lead people to be confused and not really sure about where the information that they want is actually located. There are some things within this website that are redundant. So here we have an exhibits page, so current exhibits of the HC. And then if you go down to education and outreach, there is also an exhibits page, which I'm not sure why there are two separate pages about exhibits. So that's a little confusing, especially since some of these resources are ones that they mention in this exhibits page. So that can definitely be kind of confusing, and I just don't know why it's set up that way. Another thing which is frustrating and inconsistent is the location of this search option. So you can use this search option to find what you're looking for. So for instance, earlier when I was looking around, I decided to search by browse collections by subject area, and it will take you to results just within the HC itself that can actually be useful for useful to help you find what you're looking for, which is good. But what's interesting is this isn't an option for all these pages. So for example, if you go back to this exhibits, that search option disappears. I don't know why. So sometimes you have the option to search what you're looking for, but other times you don't have the option to search what you're looking for. And I don't really, I don't understand why that is the case. So there are definitely some navigational issues, some issues with consistency across the website. It's probably more difficult to get to certain parts of this website than it really needs to be if there were kind of simple things like a drop-down menu or that search option available universally instead of in selective parts of this website. So I also have a contact us, which is fine, but then they have some of the information down here as well, so that's a little bit redundant too. Breadcrumbing is something that Lynch and Horton mentions as far as a good navigational tool, and there is some of that here. So you can kind of go to back and forth from the main page to whatever you were looking at before. So that's helpful. If you go back to research services here, let's go ahead and click on products of HC research. So you can go back to research services and then back to the HC. So there is a little bit of breadcrumbing. The overall aesthetic is pretty consistent, like the colors are consistent. So that helps you sort of have an understanding of where you are as well within the website. So yeah, that's fine. But yeah, there are definitely some navigational issues that get in the way of accessing information as quickly and efficiently as you probably should be able to. The contrast is good, which is something that the Lynch and Horton article mentions in page design. There's good color and contrast, so that's pretty good. Generally speaking, on the pages, there is a good contrast between or a good balance between images and text, although sometimes there is some text and no images. So that's pretty good. I guess sometimes I don't know, it just seems like its website feels a little amateurish to me in some ways. It just feels like kind of like clunky and poorly organized, and I know that the HC is a great archive with a lot of great material, but it's just not presented terribly well from the homepage sort of forward, which is really too bad. So yeah, there is definitely some room for improvement, especially when it comes to the information architecture, and really that's probably the most important thing, right? To provide an efficient way for your researchers to find what they're looking for. So yeah, a decent website, I would say, but one with definite room for improvement and kind of more consistency as far as what is available and when. Okay, so yeah, essentially what I just did, looking at the Lynch and Horton chapters and connecting them to the AHC's website, that's what you can do for your repository outreach review. And the repository outreach review, if you choose the website option, also asks you to evaluate how well your institution's website connects to the different criteria that the PIDL article has as far as websites that facilitate on-site use. So I'll spend the next little while looking at some of those components and connecting them to the AHC's website as well. So the first component that the PIDL article mentions is ask questions. So how able are researchers? How well are researchers able to post questions to the archive staff through the website? So an online form gets 4 points. Instant message gets 3 points, and linked email gets 3 points. So kind of suggesting that an online form is the best. There is a way to set up Zoom consultations. So, you can contact the HC through an email to do that. So that is an example of linked email. There's this virtual research hub. So if you click on ask a question, you can submit a form here. And so, that's the online form that PIDL is talking about. So there are a few different ways that you can get in touch with the AHC and their reference staff in order to ask a question. So it looks like there's a more detailed form here that you can fill out. So I don't really know why there are 2 forms. I don't know why it just doesn't go to this one if it's more detailed. But I guess it's better to have 2 than to have none, right? So okay, so that's pretty good. The next component is browse holdings information. So measures the ability to find link collection lists or lists. So 10 points if the collection lists are linked to finding aids with container lists. 3 points if you get collection lists but not linked to finding aids or container lists. This is something that the HC actually does pretty well too. So if you go back to the home page and you look under Explore Collections, you can find a link to the AHC's finding aids. So let's go ahead and click here. What is kind of weird is it takes you to this Archives West website. I guess this is some kind of consortium that the AHC is involved with. But it does take you right to finding aids that are just related to the AHC. And you can search through those. And they do have container lists associated with them. So yeah, that's actually pretty good too. It's pretty efficient to find a link to finding aids with container lists. So that's pretty good too. So that we would award the full 10 points for. The next criteria is search holdings information. So how well are you able to query collections information? So if the search box is on the main page, it's 7 points. If it's on subpage, it's on 3 points. As we discussed, it's not on the home page, so you kind of have to dig a little bit before you find a search box that actually searches just the AHC's resources. So that's probably the 3 points for having a search box on a subpage. I'm tempted to say it's like 1.5 points because it's not on all the subpages, it's just on some of them, which is really strange. So we'll say 1.5 points for meeting this particular criteria. So the next one that we'll look at is the view search results information component, which measures the types of information provided that allow researchers to evaluate the relevancy of search holdings. So let's go ahead and jump back into the The menu, again, you have to kind of scroll all the way down here to find this menu, which is just kind of bizarre to me. So that's yep, okay, so this one does have the search option. So measures the types of information provided that allow researchers to evaluate the relevancy of search results. Okay, so again, if we search browse collections by subject, it does have a date range, so that's helpful to determine if what you're looking for is helpful. Some of the results that the PIDL article mentions for this this criteria are collection title with link to finding aid, things like inclusive dates, link to summary information, link to background, scoping content, folder list, physical extent. So it might be more helpful to see if we can do a search for a specific collection that the agency has. So let's do a search for Ellen Simpson papers. Okay, so it's not bringing up a find aid right away. Okay, political collections. So again, it's not like terribly efficient, but eventually we can get to the Ellen Simpson papers. And this does go to the find aid for that collection. So yeah, pretty good overall. Again, it's not the most efficient process to go through, but I think we can give points for all of these different components. So pretty good there. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We'll say 8. Okay, just kind of keeping score here. Table 5, accumulate selected information. I don't really see any way to do that. There's no like shopping cart or anything that, at least as far as I can see, you can kind of put things in your shopping cart and kind of keep all of your desired information together. So we'll say that's a 0. Save selected information. I don't really see any way to do that, at least through the website. I don't see any way to create an account to store selected information. Download or export it, email it. Let's take a look here, actually. So just popping into a random, I guess you can print, so maybe you can also save the online finding aids if you would like. So I guess we can give points for download, export selected information, although again, it's kind of a convoluted process. So yeah, I'll give 1 point for that because you can sort of, but it's not through the search results that you actually type in. Like if I do a search and I find something about the Ellen Simpson papers, there's not a way for me to kind of save that directly. The next table is review information about planning a research visit. This is something that the agency does pretty well. So there's this visit us, there's a visit guide, and contact us. So information about how to have materials available for you, information about how to register, not things that PIDL mentions, but things that are pretty important nonetheless. If you go back to the home page, there is information about parking, about the location, the hours that the reading room is open, the address. all that stuff. I don't really see any directions here. Fee schedules. Let's see if that is in the how to visit guide. Yeah, I don't really see any fee schedules or anything like that. So we'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We'll say 8 out of a possible 9, so that's pretty good. Schedule a research appointment. This is pretty good. You can do the on-site research application form. So that's the schedule an appointment online with automatic confirmation. There's no way to use IM as far as I can tell. You can send a link. So I guess we'll count both of those for 6. Request materials for an appointment. Again, going back to this idea of the on-site research application form, which allows you to provide a date, and then you can actually go in and let them know which information you would like to have available for you when you arrive. So fill in an online form, that's worth 2 points. So yeah, as far as providing the information contained in Pidal's article, the HC actually does pretty well. And there's a lot that is really helpful for setting up an online visit. Kind of the frustrating thing is finding exactly where this stuff is, unless you've kind of poked around a fair amount. Again, can be pretty difficult because of the lack of drop-down menus and the lack of a search tool, which kind of varies from page to page and isn't present on the home page. So if you can find what you're looking for, it's great. And they do a good job of sort of highlighting the important stuff at the top, which is definitely beneficial. So yeah, the navigation isn't great. In some respects, it looks a little bit amateurish. But if you can find it, the information that's there and the resources that are there are useful. So yeah, kind of a mixed bag. Definitely some positives, definitely some negatives. Not every website is going to be perfect. If I was a researcher, I would say this is probably good enough, and you more or less can find what you're looking for. So yeah, this isn't a website that would make me say I'm never going to use this archive in my life. And sometimes you just have to get your foot in the door and let good enough be good enough and sort of wow researchers with the resources that you have and your reference services and your online collections. And then even if the website experience wasn't perfect, you can still sort of make up for it in other ways. So, okay, so again, this kind of analysis is something that you can do for your repository outreach review. So just keep that in mind, and let me know if you have any questions or comments. And of course, take care, and I will talk to you soon.